I was shell-shocked. Even now, talking about it put chills down my spine. It was the first very big hiccup in my career, and there's nothing like a proper crisis to discover who your friends are.
Welcome back to Crisis What Crisis, the podcast that aims to guide you towards a more resilient life and whatever it might throw at you. If this is your first time with us, then do please hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And please do leave us a review. It really does help make sure that these, I hope, useful conversations are shared as widely as possible. This episode is slightly different. In fact, it is our first ever live podcast recording. And I had the privilege of speaking to one of Britain's best known and most successful media leaders, Dawn Airey CBE. We recorded this episode on stage at the 2024 Confederation of British Industry Conference in London, where our theme was resilient leadership. Dawn has spent her career thriving on challenge and along the way earned a reputation as a bold and unapologetic trailblazer. For some who couldn't keep pace, she became Scary Airey or Zulu Dawn. From her early days at ITV, navigating a world she's described as rampantly sexist, to launching Channel 5, where her passionate leadership and sharp vision put the channel on the map, Dawn's career has been nothing short of a masterclass in resilience. But it's also included some significant setbacks, including when she left Sky TV to join what she thought would be a global media business, but which turned out to be something just 8 days later, very, very different. Today, as chair of the Women's Super League, Dawn is shaping the future of women's football. In this short episode, she provides some brilliant lessons for anyone looking to be a more resilient leader. And I hope you enjoy. So Dawn Airey, welcome to the CBI Conference and welcome to Crisis What Crisis.
Thank you, Andy. Gosh, 40 years.
How are you?
Well, quite exhausted after listening to all that lot, remembering what I've done over the years. But no, I'm good. I have a very interesting portfolio of interests. Like I say, everything spanning football, theatre, I sit on all sorts of boards. No, I've got absolutely no complaints.
Very good. Dawn, let's go back to the beginning, shall we? Mm-hmm. You achieved so much as a young woman in an industry dominated by older men. Your rise was pretty meteoric. What do you attribute your ambition to, but perhaps more importantly, your early resilience?
Well, it was a long time ago. Some would say I peaked very early. The truth is that I wasn't ambitious per se. But I always believed in doing a job really well. I mean, my parents were very, very focused on work ethic, and it's something I try and instill in my kids, which is actually good enough is not good enough. Always do things to the best of your ability. And so when I joined television in the 80s, it was a very different world, full stop, to the one we know now, and certainly very, very different in terms of television. Out of interest, anybody watching Rivals on Disney Plus at the moment? You can put your hands up. It's a guilty secret. Any one person? Oh, come on. It's a bonk fest, yes. But actually, the representation of television then was pretty accurate, actually, in terms of it was very dominated by powerful men. It was enormously creative. But it was a world that you just simply couldn't, you wouldn't recognise. You'd be closed down today if you behaved like that. But it was very much dominated, and forgive me, there's a lot of men in this audience, but I'm going to be a bit rude now, by Cro-Magnon men. It was. And you had to be very, robust. You had to be very, very robust to be heard, to be seen, to be successful. And, you know, I went in as a trainee. I knew I wanted to go into programming, but I actually went into sort of the broadcasting side of the business. And that was because I had a brilliant, brilliant mentor, a wonderful guy called Andy Allen, who said, no, this is what you're good at and this is what I want you to do. And I just rolled up my sleeves and got stuck in and tried to be everybody's friend. I wasn't a pushover. I could work hard. I could drink quite well, which was quite an important prerequisite for getting on in the 80s in television. And all of that seemed to sort of work out rather well. And I was promoted very quickly, and I was promoted exceptionally quickly. Yes, I was good at what I did. I hope that doesn't sound arrogant, because I'm so not. But in the mid-80s and onward, television realised it needed more women in senior positions, because it was dominated by men, and yet the majority of the audience was women. So it was looking to rebalance. So I was part of a wave of women who were actively promoted through the ranks.
Where was the grit from, though? Because in that environment, you could have obviously taken a different approach.
Well,
you chose to not be appalled, shocked, put down. You did the exact reverse. You ran into it and you dealt with it and you shaped it, to your own advantage. So what is it? Where did that grit come from?
Well, I think most of us have virtues or characteristics that come from childhood. So you probably can't tell it from my accent, but I'm a northerner. My parents are both Scousers. With that comes a certain stereotype. But my parents divorced when I was relatively young, and if any of you have come from parents who divorced when you're relatively young, you do tend to become a bit more resilient. And one of the responses of my parents to that breakup was to send their children to schools. I got sent as a female to an all-boys public school.
Goodness.
I went from a comprehensive where I was a bit too posh to really get on at the comprehensive to this boys' public school where I definitely wasn't going to fit in. Now, what then happens when you're in that environment? That's when I learnt resilience, really. And I also learnt, and again, it came from my parents, which was always, be both yourself, but also stand for something, but what you believe in. Don't feel you need to be part of the pack. And so at Kelly, and this was a school that I was so traumatised by, it took the best part of 50 years to get me back there, and I went there relatively recently actually to talk to the women's football team. That's what took me back.
How did that feel walking back through the door?
It was horrendous. All of those vivid memories of the traumatic time at that school, because it was traumatic to me. It wasn't to many of the men who were there, or the young men who were there. Most people had a good experience, I didn't. It brought it all flooding back. So, but what I do recognise that it gave me skills and did equip me for the world of television that I then subsequently entered, which was all male dominated in terms of how it was run. And I was always the youngest and the only female on many committees. And the way that I was effective was partly because I made sure I'd done my homework, I would not be bullied, and I was very robust, which sort of partly led to these Scary Airey and Zulu Dawn nonsense names, which a man would have just been told they were doing a great job. But
well, let's ask, how did you feel with, those comments that would appear in national media? It was kind of, in trade media, it was a reputation that you had from a certain angle. How did that make you feel?
Well, it was a caricature. And as somebody once said to me, far better to be a caricature than not to have a caricature, because it shows you've got personality. But there was an expectation, and it was interesting when I encountered folks who'd encountered me for the first time, said, "Oh, you're not like what I thought you would be." I said, "Well, what did you think I would be?" "Well, Scary Airey, Zulu Dawn." I said, "It's absolutely ridiculous." Because it's just it served me well, but it was like a sort of armour. But underneath that wasn't me at all.
Dawn, your CV tells a story of someone who was, I suspect you still are, looking for the next challenge. Mm-hmm. You seem to have a very comfortable relationship with risk.
I've always liked to build new things, and I like businesses that are challenged and you're involved in a transformation or a rethinking and a reimagining of that business. And so I realised sort of early on in my career that would probably lend itself towards, I was given an assignment, I would do it, and then I would move on and look for something else. I say look for something else. Interestingly, I say I've had a so-called career. I have not had a linear career. I've been in a fortunate position where when I've done a good job, I get offered something else. So I always say you don't resist the irresistible, and I've fortunately been offered a lot of irresistible things. But I do seek change, and I do seek starting things new. And so folks say to me, "Well, you've moved around a lot." And it's quite interesting. It's almost meant as a bit of an insult. You've moved around a lot. Well, I move around when I've actually, with the team that I've worked with, achieved success or achieved what we went out to do. And then I do go on to something else. I haven't been a leader who comes in, transforms, sits and reaps the benefit of that. Now, in hindsight, when I look back on my career, there are moments when I think, God, it would have been a lot easier if I just stayed there and the rewards would have been far greater. But that's not how I'm wired. And I've learned to live with and to enjoy that thrill of, okay, when you walk into the doors of a new business, okay, what are the challenges that we've got here? How can we have fun and be highly effective in changing or refocusing or starting this business?
So Channel 4, Channel 5, which we'll talk about in a moment, Sky, you are absolutely smashing it, and then you decide, no, I'm going to roll the dice. Why ask a question about risk? And I'm going to go and help build this new business, IStar. I don't know how many people in the audience remember the name IStar. And Dawn, you'll forgive me for saying so. The truth is, not very many, because it was a failure.
Yes, it was.
And wasn't what you thought it was going to be. Just tell us what happened.
My portfolio was everything but sport. This was in 2007, and the broadcasting and television production industry particular production was exploding, and a lot of independents were starting up. And I thought it would be really rather interesting in terms of challenging oneself to maybe get involved with setting up an independent, but one with difference. And I was approached by somebody who I thought had a really smart idea, which was not just owning a production companies, but linking it with distribution companies, linking it with a models agency, linking it with a rights agency. So these were big established businesses. So it's Stephen Fry's film Sprout. It was Paul Abbott, who was on a high, Shameless, his company Tightrope. I said there was PFD, there was Models One. There was a variety of companies, and the idea was you create content, you distribute it yourself, you use some of the literary assets and IP that you have, you use your model, you cast some from your models agency. It actually made sense, and it's what many of the big independents and many of sort of the big agencies now in the US do. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And I was approached by one person to it, but there was the group of people who put it together. I knew everybody apart from one person in there. And I thought, well, this makes sense. This makes sense, and it's exciting and it's thrilling. And I had a conversation with my then boss, James Murdoch, who said, I understand why you'd want to go and do this. So you go with our blessing. Now, I was supposed to be joining a company that was already fully funded. And because I was at Sky and I gave James good notice that I wanted to do this, I didn't want him to read that my name was in an information memorandum going around the city for raising money. And the company should have been fully funded when I joined. It wasn't. It was still out raising funds, which slightly unnerved me because I thought it should be fully funded. And it raised sort of decent money in its early seed financing, but it was the next real investment, so we could buy all of these, some of the companies that I mentioned earlier. And when I joined, I should have realised there was a problem, because the first day we were locked out of our offices, which were in the old London Council building, which is now the Marriott Hotel, I think, just literally opposite here. And anyway, a very long story, sort of truncated, is I realised there was something amiss. And I went through a revised information memorandum, and there was two people who had invested in this business who weren't in the second version of this information memorandum. So I rang them and asked them about their investment in the business. And then I found out that actually not all the money that had come that should have gone into the business in the first round funding had gone into the business, and some had gone elsewhere. Anyway.
So you've been sold a complete pup. Is what it is.
I think at the beginning maybe not, but there was somebody who was involved in the business who shouldn't have been involved in the business, and the books were not as they would seem. I realised that we couldn't meet the debtors. I go to speak to my personal lawyer and say, get me out of here. She says, you're the chief executive of this company. You have an obligation, especially if you know you're wrongfully trading, because there's double test of wrongful trading. Can you pay the debts as they fall due? If you can't, do not incur further costs. But if you can raise money to settle those debts, then you should. So you have to continue doing it. And I said, but I know they're not going to be able to pay me At the end of the month, we're not going to be able to meet payroll. She said, then at that point, you can walk away. Until then, you need to continue leading this company. So I've got a whole host of companies who think we're going to buy them, and I know we're not going to raise the money in time, but I have to see if we can do it. So I then get was forced to go out and talk to potential investors about what we were trying to do. And actually, there was a good response. But most of the investors said, you've got too many assets here. We just want to concentrate on the production. We don't quite get what you want a models agency for as well. So they said, we will invest in you, Dawn, but a different set of assets, and it's going to take around about sort of probably 6 months to do it. And I thought, this is not what I came in here to do. Now, normally, when I'm presented with problems, give me a monkey, I'll hold on to it and sort it out. I didn't want to do that. I'd gone from a massive corporate environment where I was very, very comfortable. I had a great job to come to what should have been a fully funded company. And I had to go through the whole process of putting the company into insolvency, into voluntary insolvency, which we did. Now, what was really interesting is during that process, and I was literally in and out. I was in and out in 8 days, but it seemed like a hell of a lot longer. I reached out to, as you do in crisis, to people that you know and you trust. And there's nothing like a proper crisis to discover who your friends are. And there was so much sort of goodwill and people saying, look, we'll help you get through this, don't worry. And it was also rather lovely because my first daughter had just been born and my father was staying with me and my dad was an enormous source of strength. I said, oh, don't worry about that, darling. I've been involved with loads of businesses that haven't gone well. You'll be okay. But it didn't feel like that to me. And everybody was looking to me for answers. And the one thing, again, I learned, but I've always done, and you will know, because I know you're all leaders in this room, I've always tried to be really transparent, really transparent. So I remember getting all the companies together that we were buying and saying, look, you all think you're about to become rich and we're about to buy you. We're not. We're absolutely and utterly not. We might be able to buy some of you X months down the line if we can raise the funds in the time, but I don't see it. And by the way, I'm not going to be the chief executive.
So Dawn, the impact, 8 days, but a pretty important 8 days. You'd made a big leap.
Yes.
I mean, again, I'm going to ask the question, how did it feel? And the obvious follow-up question, how did you then manage those feelings? Because it was leadership in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways, but how did you navigate it?
Well, how I felt, I was devastated. It wasn't what I signed up for. I was also scared, telling you the truth. I was really scared. And I also felt a very strong sense of duty and obligation because I'd also taken people from Sky with me. And I knew we couldn't pay them. Well, they could because I paid them until they got jobs because that's what good, decent people do. But there was lots of hopes and dreams that were going with the acquisition of these companies. And I just couldn't do it. So I was scared. I said scared. But knew that I could and would get out of it, and did. And I was shell-shocked. It took me, even now talking about it, it put chills down my spine because it was the first very big hiccup in my career. I mean, I've had plenty, but it was a massive, massive, massive hiccup. And I remember I'd gone from being sort of golden girl at British Broadcasting to, I remember The Guardian, and I rather like The Guardian, still do, sorry. And it said, darkest day for Area Iostar. And there was this piece saying, she's supposed to be really smart, really dumb. Now, what I always say to folks is, well, actually, you know what, that was quite harsh judgment. Because if somebody goes out to deceive you, it's a deception. And you don't go through life thinking people are going to deceive you. You just don't do that. And I had the comfort that everybody involved in Iostar, apart from one person I knew, and that one person was the person who brought down the whole idea.
Did it impact your sense of adventure then? Did you become more reticent?
Yeah, I did.
Risk averse as a result?
I was very clear I wasn't going to go and work for an independent. I wasn't going to go and set up my own business, even though I have now. Again, no, absolutely. I want to go run back to the corporate world where you've got a hell of a lot more support. But yeah, it did. It was very bruising. But also I learnt a lot of things about it as well.
Dawn, let's talk about one of your many triumphs, Channel 5, the other great love of your life. A station you built, then saved when you returned.
Yep.
An absolute, unadulterated success. But then you came back in to save the business, and then you were forced there's a day, presumably, where you're taken in an office and told, oh, Dawn, we now need you to sell this business. And then a day not long after that says, oh, and by the way, we need you to sell this to Richard Desmond. Which I know is a decision that you weren't fully in support of, if I can put it that way.
I think that's fair enough.
So how do you handle that? There's an awful lot of emotions there, right, as a leader. You'd been at Channel 5 twice. It was very much part of your life, emotionally very important to you. How do you deal with that one?
Really hard. When you've created something, which I had been part of a team that had created this channel against all odds, and it was against all odds, having to retune the nation's video recorders. Everybody's were dismissive of us. We knew what we wanted to do, which was create a modern mainstream channel, appeal to a younger audience. And we went from a 0 to a 6.2% share, a company worth $1 billion in 5 years. The rest of the broadcasting were a bit snotty about what we did, but we didn't care. We knew our audience and we super served that audience. Then I left, went to Sky, and then came back because the channel had sort of lost its way. It tried to appeal to an audience that it didn't have, and RTL, who owned the channel, wanted to not get it back to where it was, but to sort of refocus it. And yes, the channel had to be sold. Why did it have to be sold? Well, I went back, my timing was a bit off, and we all know in life that timing is really quite important. So I went back to, I burnt a few bridges by leaving ITV within a year of having gone there to be MD of production, to go back to 5. And I went back to 5 because I loved it so much and I could see what needed to be done. But I joined it 2 weeks after Lehman Brothers had gone belly up. And then the world changed, as we all know, in 2008. Things were just, the economy was brutal. And when I went back, I had to say, look, we've got to take costs out of the channel, and we've got to try and refocus its programming. So I took a heap of costs out and it started to get it back to growth. But it wasn't yet break even or making profit. It was very, 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 very close to it. And in 2010, the owners, RTL, who had been brilliant owners of Channel 5, said, we are going to sell all break-even and loss-making businesses. And they were a huge, diversified European media owner. And we fell into that category. So I'd been back, I'd done the hard yards with the new team of taking costs out, and I said refocusing the business, and then I was told to sell it. And they wanted it sold really fast, which was an issue. If you put up for sale any broadcaster in the UK, the terrestrial broadcasters, it'll probably end up, if another broadcaster buys it, with the Monopolies and Mergers Commission for a review. RTL just had to get rid of it. So at the time, Channel 4, then there's a new chief executive just about to start, David Abrahams, and I thought actually the best thing will be for 4 and 5 to come together. And we had numerous conversations, but couldn't quite get him there. And so Richard Desmond, who'd long coveted a television license, nipped in and bought it. And I have to say, the man was a genius in terms of buying at the absolute right time. He bought it, he got it for a steal. We'd done all the hard yards of taking the money out. When it was sold, there were onerous contracts that we had with RTL's production division all fell away. And so he acquired the company. Now, why was it, for me, a particular, catastrophe?
Did it feel like a catastrophe?
For me, it did, yeah, it did. And because it was, I was pleased for the shareholders when they got a sale. But it was like Channel 5 was such a tight-knit community, such a warm community, such a actually wonderful place to work that did things against the odds. It was very, very, very mutually supportive. And then we were going to Richard Desmond, who has a particular style of leadership and running organisations, which is very alien to Channel 5. And I sort of knew it was like the barbarians at the gate. All the things that we did were going to be ripped apart. And culturally, it was. And my heart sank, and I had to go and work for him for up to 6 months. That was part of my deal, but we managed to survive 2 weeks. And then I was off. I have to say, it all went wrong when I went to my first board meeting, and it was sort of there was a knock on the table. He got up, smoked a cigar, blew smoke all over me, and I said, well, where's everyone gone? He said, well, piss break, PB, piss break, toilet break. I said, actually, go to the toilet's quite a good thing. Where's the toilet? He said, he said, we don't have a ladies here. I said, well, wait there, this is the executive floor. He goes, yeah, we don't have a ladies here. He said, you can use the disabled toilet sort of three floors down. I thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? I'm not going to thrive here. So it didn't work out. I was very glad that he didn't want me to continue working. So at the end of the day, it was fine. He made an absolute killing and a fortune, but it was devastating to me. I mean, to be honest, I went back and I thought I'd be there until I retired, but I wasn't. I was there for less than just 2 years.
Dawn, we're short of time, so my apologies for rattling through here, but we can't not ask you about the football. Chair of the Women's Super League and the Women's Championship, you are, as I said earlier, transforming the game for women. How does that challenge match to some of the other roles that you've had in the past? I mean, presumably, I know it's a passion project. Yeah. One of your two daughters is a very good footballer, I know.
Matilda.
How does it compare?
Well, it was one of those things again. Somebody came along and said, hey, we think you could help us with this. I had a deep and long, enduring family interest in football. And I thought, yes, I think I can help you with this. And the FA had set up, they said the two leagues, the Super League and the Championship, need to be set up as professional leagues. They needed their own governance, but they also needed sort of focus and elevation, and they wanted a really good broadcast deal. Unfortunately, I knew how broadcast worked. And so I went in to be the first chair, and now those leagues are out of the FA and we're an independent body over here. Why did I do it? Really, really quite simply, and I should have added actually early on, that whatever I've done, I'm always looking for the socially purposeful element of it, socially purposive element of it. It's not just about doing things for money, it's what we're trying to do that's different. And football, our vision is really quite simple, which is we're using the power of women's football to shape how women are perceived, and we're using it for huge positives. Plus, we're trying to transform how the game is played, and we're very focused on making this the most successful commercial league in the world. And how are we doing that? Broadcast is really important. So getting a really good broadcast deal away, critical, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. And you can just see that journey. 17.5 million watch the women win the Euros. 87,000 women, I say 87,000 people watch them in Wembley. There's a huge investment going on in the game, and the opportunity is immense. If I told you that it was 2021, and it was a Deloitte report, that there is £1 billion spent on women's sport, that's marketing, attendances, broadcast, versus how much would you like to guess is spent on men's sport? All sports, 472 billion. So women's sport is worth 0.2% of men's sport. And yet the growth of sport is the growth of women's sport. So it's a real opportunity here for smart people to make a lot of money. But it's also really, really important to show little girls that you can aspire and you can be a footballer. They're unbelievable. The positivity of playing team sport to young women is so important. And it really is a movement. And it's a different sort of game that's played. So we do feel as if we're battling the odds somewhat, but we're making good progress.
Well, congratulations, Dawn.
Thank you.
One final question. As you look back across your career, what moments are in sort of ultra high definition, if I can put it that way? Is it the challenges and the difficult moments, some of which you've given us a flavour of here, or the successes? What do you carry with you more brightly, if I can put it that way? I think
it's the bookend of both of those. I would say successes, March the 30th, 1997, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the launch of Channel 5. That will forever. And then the darkest moments. IOStar, 48 hours in. This is a company that is built on sand.
Dawn Airey, thanks for a proper conversation. Thanks for joining us on Crisis What Crisis. Dawn Airey, everyone.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, then please do leave us a review. And if you found it helpful or even inspiring, we would be delighted if you recommended us to your friends. It means an awful lot if you do. You can watch the full episodes on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and if you hit subscribe, you'll find a lot more Crisis conversations. As always, full transcripts are available on our website, along with links. Just head to crisiswhatcrisis.com, and thank you so much for listening.